welcome you all again this morning, and thank you for being here. I wanted to let you know that if you think I can't see where you sit, I do. And I do notice that many of you are having to sit in different seats than you normally do because we're having more and more people come and attend our services, which is a great problem to have. And so we thank God for that. But I do want you to know, it does throw me a little bit when I'm like, man, that person always sits there and they're there. What's going on? So just know I can see you. So if you're, I can see you. But anyway, today, hey, we're continuing our series called Headspace, where each week we've been looking at what to do with our thoughts, because when we have thoughts, they're not harmless, right? They don't just stay in our heads. Our thoughts shape our lives and who we become. And I've heard from so many of you throughout the first 3 weeks of this series that this has been one of the most helpful series that we've done since I've been here. And I just want you to know I agree, because just remember, before I bring a message, God works on me, right? And more than I think any other series I've ever done, this has been helpful for me. And I've shared a little bit how my own struggles with my thoughts, and I'm going to share a little bit more today. So this has really helped me in my relationship with God and in my battle with my thoughts. And I just want to say again, if you've missed any part of this series, if this is your first time, I'm just going to give you a shameless plug, man. Go to hermitagehills.com and check out the first 3 weeks of this series, because I think it's that important that if you've missed one of these, that you go and do that. And I just want you to know, when I was praying through this series over a month ago, I sensed that after we spent time going through the offensive strategies that God wants us to utilize with our thoughts, and looking at the defensive strategies, like taking our thoughts captive, that God really wanted us to camp out and spend an entire message talking about this. What do you do when your thoughts become more than you can bear? What do you do when your thoughts become more than you can bear? Look, I'm not talking about when you go to the grocery store and you get a text from your wife to grab something among the sea of options, and it leaves you overwhelmed because you rarely shop and you see all these brands, and she said it was one thing, and then you're like, I don't see that thing anywhere. Maybe it's just me that deals with that. Anyway, that gives me a little bit of anxiety, okay, when I go shopping. I don't normally do it that much, and okay, but I'm talking about not that, but what should we do when what we think and what's in our mind is leaving us distressed? What should we do when our thoughts feel like they're more than we can bear, like it's leaving us hopeless, helpless? It maybe even, it feels like the world is crowding in on us, like we're in a dark place, like we're drowning, like we're in a debilitating state. Like, what should we do when our thoughts feel like they're more than we can bear? What should you do? What should I do when we experience grief, like real grief? When we experience anxiety, depression, panic attacks, stress? Like what are we supposed to do when our thoughts are just like, man, this is more than I can bear? Well, the answer is, of course, what we've talked about the last 2 weeks with the offensive and the defensive strategies. But when you're in the middle of something like your thoughts being more than you can bear, there's something that you can do. And when you do, God promises that you will experience something in the moment that you need in that moment, more so than being able to recall the strategies that we've gone over. There's something that you can do, and God promises that you will experience if you do, when you're in the moment of your thoughts being more than you can bear. And today, I just want us to talk about it. I want us to see what God has for all of us. But before we see what that thing is, I want you to know a few things. Number one, if you have experienced, or you currently are in a season where your thoughts are more than you can bear, I just want you to know one thing. You are not alone. You are not alone. The American Psychological Association found that around 33% of adults felt overwhelmed in 2022. And another report in 2022 came out and said that about 52% of Americans had felt stressed to the point that they could not cope or deal with things at least once in that year. Translation: millions of Americans have experienced what you have or are experiencing. Feeling like your thoughts are more than you can bear. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. Some being that we've created a world in which stress and anxiety is being caused by the things that we're doing. Hello, smartphones and social media, always being on. We weren't created to always be on all the time, always have notifications coming to us, always being connected with everyone, yet feeling completely disconnected. Like, that's not what we were created to be and to do. And so I think that's some of the cause, okay? Dr. John Deloney talks about anxiety as a smoke alarm. He says that a smoke alarm in a house is what? It's to alert you that there's smoke in the house. He says that's what anxiety is. It's alerting you that something under the surface or in your environment is off or wrong, and you should pay attention to it. So maybe there are some things that we're doing that are contributing to our thoughts being more than we can bear. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Again, I'm giving you some disclaimers before we get into what we can do based upon when we feel like our thoughts are more than we can bear. And the first thing is that you're not alone. You're not alone. Not only because millions of other Americans experience this, but most importantly, I want you to know you're not alone because the most important person who ever has and ever will live experienced thoughts that were more than he could bear. And his name is Jesus. Jesus experienced thoughts that were more than he could bear when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night before he went to the cross. Let me just read to you two descriptions of what Matthew and Luke record. After Jesus has gone to the garden and he's there and he's praying before it is that he goes to the cross, he says this to the disciples. Listen to this. My soul is overwhelmed. Matthew 26:38. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And then again in Luke 22:44, Luke writes, and being in anguish, he, that is Jesus, prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Do you hear those descriptions of what Jesus experienced? Sorrow to the point of death. Anguish, the Greek word there is agonia, anguish, agony. And he was in such agony, his thoughts were so overwhelmed, the thoughts were so heavy that he experienced sorrow to the point of death and anguish to where he sweat drops of blood. This is a medical condition called hematidrosis, and it's associated with extreme mental or emotional distress that causes your blood vessels to break open and blood to come out of your sweat glands. I mean, that's pretty heavy. That's pretty serious what Jesus went through. You're not alone if you've been in a situation where you feel like your thoughts are more than you can bear and it's overwhelming you. Jesus knows something about that. Number two, the second thing I want you to know. You're not more broken than others if you've experienced this. You're not more broken than others if you've experienced this. Jesus was sinless and experienced the weight of grief and sorrow and agony about what he was facing. Why did he experience that? Because the weight of what he was about to face was so much to bear. Listen, we aren't Jesus, who was sinless, and we have never faced what Jesus faced. Why do we think that we may face lesser things, and since we are sinful, have a harder time with them? Like we should expect that. We should understand that, hey, we're not perfect. We're not sinless. We are fallen. But if you do experience thoughts that are more heavy than you can bear, I just want everybody to know this morning, that doesn't mean you're more broken than anyone else. We're all broken. We're all sinful because we live in a sin-filled world. And so not only do we choose things that are sinful, but we're surrounded and we're in a broken world that is sinful. And so we've got two things going against us, right? Jesus was sinless living in a broken world, all right? We've got two things going against us. And so we don't need to feel or think that, well, I'm more broken because I'm experiencing this. No. Like, that's a result of living in a fallen world. And then finally, third thing I just want to say before we get into what to do when you feel or when your thoughts are more than you can bear, is that there is no shame or judgment in needing professional help. There's no shame or judgment in needing professional help. If your thoughts are more than you can bear and it feels like they're about to kill you, I just want to say from the outset, again, there is no shame or no judgment in getting professional help. We as a church partner with Lantern Lane Farm Counseling, led by Ralph Cook, who's the founder of that counseling center. I actually talked with a lot of people this week in preparation for this message, but he was one that I made sure I spent some time with because I'm like, hey, as a professional, I want to know who deals in this area. Like, tell me, I said, hey, tell me the one thing that you definitely want me not to say, right? Because I don't want to say that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say that. And so I'm like, tell me that, and then help me with some other things. And he was so helpful. He was so helpful. But there's no shame or judgment in needing professional help. Unfortunately, there has been in the broader world at times, but I just want you to know there's no shame or judgment. If you have thoughts, let me just say this too from the outset. If you have thoughts of taking your own life, you need to call 911 immediately. Don't play with that. You are precious. But consulting with a licensed therapist or counselor or taking medication, listen, it's not somehow anti-faith. Just like having diabetes and consulting with a doctor and taking medication is not anti-faith. All right? We need to really talk about this, okay? We got to make sure we get this. When we get a physical diagnosis or we are sick physically with our ankle or our body or our chest, what do? If you feel bad enough, you go to the doctor, right? If I'm sick, I'm a pastor. If I'm sick, man, I want you to pray for me, but I also want you to kick me and say, go to the doctor, right? Because there's nothing wrong with that, okay? In the same way, our brains are part of our body, and no doubt there's a lot of blurred lines between what the Bible tells us to do with our thoughts, the instruction on it, and what we know our brains are physiologically, okay? But just as your body neck down can be sick, our heads can be sick as well. We can have something going on where we need to seek professional help. And that's okay, and hear me here, you're not less of a Christian if you need professional help. Something else that's really interesting here in this disclaimer before we keep going. Luke 22:44 tells us that Jesus was in agony and sweat drops of blood. The verse before that, in verse 43, we're told that angels attended to him and strengthened him. I'm not saying you need to start calling your doctors angels, okay? But I am saying there was something about Jesus in his humanity that experience wore him out and angels came to him. That's just interesting. Another thing about there's no shame or judgment in needing professional help. I heard one pastor talking about this, thinking about the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus told. He's teaching one day and he says, someone asked, hey, who is my neighbor? Who should I love as my neighbor? And Jesus tells him the story about a Good Samaritan who, when he came across someone who was badly beaten, that the Samaritan came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him, and then he bandaged his wounds, poured on him oil and wine, and then he took the man on his donkey and took care of him and took him to an inn to take care of him. Like, Jesus didn't tell the story, hey, how do you love your neighbor? Well, you just pray for them. No, you should pray for them. But there's nothing wrong with getting professional help. I just wanted to make sure that we were there before we kept going, okay? Early Christians, you know why we have hospitals today? It's because of early Christians who cared enough about people to say, hey, we need to establish places that take care of people's physical needs. There can be chemical imbalances in the brain that are beyond our control. There are some clinical diagnoses that you can't just pray away. Can God heal and absolutely heal a clinical diagnosis? Absolutely. And He can. I got a lot of messages this week from different people when I said what I was going to be talking about, and one person messaged me and said, hey, Matt, feel free to share this, but I gave my life to Christ a little over a year and a half ago, and I had had debilitating panic attacks for over 20 years, and since giving my life to Christ, they're gone. Like, I think that's amazing, right? And that can be your story. It can. But your story can also be that I've had panic attacks for 20 years, gave my life to Christ, and I feel like they're a little better, but I still struggle with them. Why? Because we live in a fallen, broken world where sometimes these things happen, and one day you will be fully healed, okay? So there's some disclaimers, all right? There's some disclaimers that are out of the way. So what is that thing that God tells us to do that will give us something that we all need in the midst of the thoughts that are overwhelming us? What is that thing? And just to be clear, this is for everyone, no exception. It's not that if you need professional help that you can just tune out from what we're about to go through. No. I was talking to someone else this week who told me if it weren't for what we're going to look at today, the teaching of Scripture today, I would not be where I am in my mental health battle. But were it also not for the professional help, I wouldn't have been able to even come to the place of battling my thoughts. See, it's a both and, but make no mistake, no one is exempt from what we're going to talk about today, okay? Because mental health and what we do with our thoughts, and when we feel like things are more than we can bear, it is something spiritual that God has something to say about. So, what should you do when your thoughts are heavy? What should you do when you're experiencing anxiety, grief, depression? What should you do? Well, Paul, a man that I talk about a lot, wrote multiple letters, the majority of the New Testament. He wrote these letters to different churches. And the letter that he wrote to the church at ancient Philippi gives us instruction on what we should do when we find ourselves in this situation. And what's important to realize is that Paul wrote this letter from a prison cell. Translation, he wasn't in a palace in air conditioning ordering DoorDash, all right? He was in a terrible situation. It was dire. He was being beaten. He was hungry. He needed clothing. He was deprived. He was under Roman guard. His life could be taken at any moment. And he writes to the church at Philippi, who were obviously going through something that was overwhelming them as well. And he's going to give you and give me the formula of what you should do. And here's what he writes, Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 4. He writes, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice." Now let's stop right there. It's like, Matt, you just spent this whole time talking about what to do with our thoughts when they're more than we can bear. Now you're saying we're supposed to rejoice? Well, I'm not saying that. Paul is saying that. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. Like, always is pretty all-inclusive, right? Meaning there's no situation that you could ever be in where rejoicing in the Lord was a bad idea. And notice, he doesn't say rejoice in your situation. He doesn't say rejoice in the fact that your thoughts are more than you can bear. No, he says rejoice in the Lord. And this is something that's really interesting. One pastor pointed out as I was studying this week that Paul could have said rejoice in Christ, rejoice in God. He said rejoice in the Lord. Lord there is a Greek translation of the Greek word kurios. Kurios translates Lord in English, okay? But the real root or understanding of it is that of master, that of boss, that of someone who is in charge and in control. Rejoice in the one who is in charge, the one who has authority over your life, the one who you can trust is in control always. You know what oftentimes leads to depression or a depressed state, okay, is discouragement of unmet expectations that didn't turn out the way that you hoped they would, or that you thought they would, or that you thought you were in charge of controlling. You know what leads to anxiety oftentimes? Feeling like you're out of control, right? The truth is, none of us are in control. None of us are ultimately in charge. The Lord, Paul says, is in charge, and we should rejoice in Him and who He is and what He has done for us. No matter what we're facing, no matter what we're going through, this is similar to the offensive strategy we looked at last week to think on true thoughts, rejoicing in who God is. We'll come back to this, but then he goes on. He says, verse 5, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Isn't that interesting? Paul makes sure and highlights this point that God is not far from you, that God is not distant from you. When you're going through a difficult time, when times are heavy, when you're like, my thoughts are more than I can bear, your tendency is to look downward, inward, not upward. Your tendency is to think you're all alone and that God is far away. Your tendency is to think, well, God is great and He's big and He's so far off. And yeah, He came in the person of Jesus 2,000 years ago, but Jesus went to heaven. And so I don't know if God is still near. But Paul is saying, no. God is near. Like the Lord is near to you. You aren't alone. It's almost like He's going to give us something to do, rejoice in the Lord, something to know, the Lord is near, before He gives us what is oftentimes the most popular and highlighted verse in the whole Bible. On the Bible app, it's regularly in the top 5 of the verse that is searched or highlighted every year. And it's as if Paul wants you to know, before I tell you what I'm about to tell you, make sure that you rejoice in the Lord and you remember that He's near, and then He comes with it. Verse 6, do not be anxious about anything. Now, let's just stop right there. It's like, Paul, if rejoicing when I'm facing these things isn't hard enough, don't be anxious? How? How am I not anxious? It's like, Paul, are you saying that I should never feel anxious about anything? No, that's not what Paul's saying. How do I know that? Because there is some anxiety that is healthy anxiety. In your brain, there's something called the amygdala that controls the flight or fight response in your brain. And if you are near a cliff and you get really close to it, it's a good thing if your amygdala goes off and says, hey, you should feel a little anxious. You should back up from the edge, right? Like that's a good thing. But what do we also know? We also know that oftentimes we experience thoughts, we think thoughts come, and we didn't ask for them to come there. We've talked about this. That's what's all about, taking our thoughts captive. When they come in, do something with them, right? And so does he mean, hey, do not ever feel anxious or do not ever have an anxious thought? No. That's not what he means. Does Paul mean never have generalized anxiety disorder? And you're like, well, I was diagnosed with that and I didn't choose that. So if that's what Paul means, well, that doesn't seem very helpful. To which, that's not what Paul meant. Paul didn't even know there was such thing as generalized anxiety disorder. All right? So that's not what Paul's talking about. What is Paul referring to when he says, don't be anxious about anything? Well, listen to me. This is where it gets really exciting. All right? When you go in the Greek and you look at the word translated as anxious, that's the Greek word merimnao. And grammatically, merimnao is in the present active imperative. Come on now. Isn't that amazing? That is such good news. That is such good news. And you don't know why it's good news. I'm about to tell you. merimnao is in the present active imperative. Present means in Greek that this is a verb that is to be ongoing, continuous, and it's an imperative, it's a command for all time, for all people, okay? A similar verse that is in the present tense and is an imperative is in Ephesians chapter 5 that says, be filled with the Spirit. Do not get drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. We've talked about this several months ago. And the command there is better translated, not be filled with the Spirit as if you just do it one time and you're good, but the better translation is be being filled with the Spirit. That you receive the Holy Spirit when you've come into a relationship with Christ, but throughout your life, the Holy Spirit can have greater influence over your life or lesser influence over your life. And the degree to which he has greater influence is you being filled with the Spirit. How are you filled with the Spirit? It's by repenting. It's by consecrating yourself. It's by humbling yourself, surrendering yourself, okay? We've talked about this. So why does that matter? Because the command in Ephesians, be filled with the Spirit, is the same grammatically, except for in Ephesians it's in the passive and this is in the active. That's just tense. That doesn't matter. It's the present tense that matters. Present imperative, that what Paul is saying is keep on being anxious. But he's not saying keep on being anxious, is he? Because he's negated it before he got to the word merimnao. He said, do not keep on being anxious is a better translation. Do you track with me? Do not keep on being anxious. The issue Paul is getting at here is dwelling on anxiety and allowing your anxiety to be your identity and your anxiety to be what you are choosing. That's what Paul is saying, do not do. Sarai, our worship leader, shared with me a quote this week that was really helpful. And it was, you can't control where the birds fly, but you can control whether or not you let it create a nest in your head. I thought that was pretty good. It's not choosing anxiety. It's like, okay, Matt, well, it doesn't always feel like I can't do anything but choose it. I got that. But Paul is saying here in verse 6, do not be anxious about anything. Okay, then Matt, what am I supposed to do? Because to not do that is really difficult. So I need an alternative so that I can not preoccupy myself with being anxious or with having my thoughts overwhelming. Like, what is the alternative here? Paul gives us the alternative. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, every is pretty inclusive. In every situation, no matter what you're going through, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. When you're going through something that is really overwhelming and your thoughts are more than you can bear, even if it's not a situation, but it's anxiety that you can't even point to a cause, Paul says, here's what you do in that moment. When you are feeling that way, choose not to choose anxiety, and instead, here's what you do. Pray. Bring your requests to God. And I love the seriousness with which Paul clarifies here. By prayer and petition, making an appeal. It's begging God, God, this is what I'm dealing with and I need your help, which is, it's just humbling yourself before the one who what? You know is an authority, you know is in charge, that you know is Lord, and falling at his feet and saying, God, I am begging you, this is what I'm dealing with. By prayer and petition with thanksgiving. It's not coming to God and just asking him for what you need. It's asking him in the context of worshiping and thanking him for who he is. See, so often when we think about anxiety, when we think about our thoughts that become so heavy and more than we can bear, it doesn't help when we think on them and they control our mind. He's giving us an alternative, and thanksgiving or gratitude with thanksgiving, like being grateful, it causes your mind to shift and preoccupy with what it is that you have to be grateful for. Thanksgiving, gratitude is the antidote to worry because it repositions your mind and heart on who you should be focused on anyway. So it's coming to God and it's saying, God, I focused on this a lot. I've worried about it. I've been anxious about it. This grief is killing me. Everything that I'm experiencing is more than I can bear. And so, God, I'm just going to give it to you. I'm going to beg you to take it away from me. And I'm going to thank you for who you are and what you've done. And remember, Paul is writing this to the church at Philippi while he is in prison. And remember, I told you we'd come back to verse 4 and 5. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again. Rejoice. It's almost like he knew they were going to question, so he's like, let me say it again. Rejoice. It's almost as if Paul, if you could like double click on verse 4 and like look at the notes that Paul wrote but didn't include, it's almost like it would include, hey, I have so much to be joyful about. I'm in Christ. I have a relationship with him. What else do I need? It doesn't matter what happens to me. Nobody can take away what Christ has done for me and what he's promised to deliver me from. If I die in this prison, if they kill me, if I never get out, man, I have eternity to look forward to. I have so much to be joyful about, and so I'm going to choose to be joyful in who God is, not my situation. And so, God, when I'm bringing before you my request and I'm begging you to help in this situation because my thoughts are too much to bear, I'm going to choose to also be grateful to you for it. And if you're like, well, it doesn't feel like God cares that much if that's what I'm going through, I would just say, don't ever doubt God's care for you when you're in a season of doubt, because you can look no further than what he did for you on the cross to know that he cares for you. When you're going through a situation and your thoughts are more than you can bear, it's very easy to not even look up, not be grateful, and feel like there's no way I can do Philippians 4:6, because how can I? And it's a good reminder to remind yourself that God cares for you more than you could ever care for yourself. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, one of my favorite verses. Listen to this. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Cast all your merimnao on him because he merimnaos you? No, it's a different Greek word there. Cast all your merimnao on him because he melees you. He is interested in you. He is concerned for you. You are his treasure. He cares for you. When you realize that, it will drive you to say, okay, if it's within my control, I am not going to choose anxiety. I'm not going to allow these thoughts that are more than I can bear to be what defines me. I am going to choose to lift it to God, to surrender it to him. I'm going to petition him. I'm going to thank him for it. And that's what prayer really is. Prayer is not about getting something from God. It's about putting whatever you're facing in his hands. It's about aligning your will with him. Prayer is about dependence on God. If he cares for me, then why wouldn't I surrender? Why wouldn't I pray? And then something else I'm going to challenge you to do is to tell somebody what you're going through so they can pray for you too. When you tell somebody what you're going through, you have someone else who's in the battle of prayer with you. Oftentimes, it's difficult if you have never told anybody what you're going through and you hear me saying, man, God cares for you, cast your anxiety on him because he cares for you, and you can pray, you're like, well, you realize God gave us one another to help us know that God is not far. God gave us one another to remind one another and to come together with one another to know that God is not far. So many that I talked to this week told me how they've never told anybody that they struggle with anxiety, or they've never told anybody that they've been to a doctor for it, that they've never told anybody that they struggle with this. And I said, why? And they said, because I'm afraid if I told somebody what I'm going through, that they would then think that I'm a failure. I would feel like a failure. That I would think, people would think that I obviously just don't have enough faith. You need to tell someone so that they can pray for you and so that they can remind you from God's word that you're not alone, and so that you can know that it's the enemy of God who wants you to stay silent, because the things that you don't confront and don't face oftentimes are what take you in. As I was talking to Ralph Cook this week, he told me, when we were talking about anxiety, he told me about the mountain lion. And I was like, oh, tell me about a mountain lion. And he was like, you know about a mountain lion? I'm like, I don't know about a mountain lion. Ralph, tell me about a mountain lion. And so he was telling me about a mountain lion. He's like, you know what you're supposed to do if you're hiking and you come across a mountain lion? I'm like, no, Ralph, I don't know what I'm supposed to do when I come across a mountain lion. Please tell me, because I don't do a lot of hiking, but if I do, I want to know. He said, let me tell you what you do. He said, you don't run from it because it thinks you're prey, and you don't act like it's not there because it'll tear you to pieces. He said, what you do when you face a mountain lion is you act big, and you act like a threat, and you try to show it that you're there to fight. That's what prayer is. That's what prayer is. Prayer is saying to your anxiety or to your thing that's too heavy for you to bear, it's saying, hey, you're not bigger than God. And I maybe can't do anything, but I know God can, and I'm going to go with him because that's literally what he's called me to do in Philippians 4, verse 6. And I'm going to come at you with prayer, and I'm going to thank him for it. You know, a few years ago, I didn't do that. I told you at the start of this series I was going to share something, and I fought it all week whether or not I was going to share it, but I'm going to share it. A few years ago, I went through the darkest season of my life. It came on the tail end. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, you could say. COVID had happened. I know COVID happened for everybody, okay. We moved across country from Florida to Texas in June of 2020 in the middle of COVID. So we move. We're in a new city, new house, new town, new church. I'm in a new position. And when we arrive, we're in the middle of COVID. We've moved. I've started a new job. I started my doctorate. Started working on my doctorate. 8 months into being at that church in a new city in the middle of COVID, after moving, starting my doctorate, the pastor who I was there serving, who had been the pastor there for 27 years, dies from COVID. I'm thrust into more responsibility and leadership than I ever thought I was going to have at that church. I talked to that pastor when I came to that church, and here was his conversation. It was, hey, you come to this church, you be here for three to 5 years, you serve here, you get your doctorate, then we'll launch you out. 8 months in, I'm there, leading, trying to comfort a church that had had a pastor for 27 years. I had had more time with him in those 8 months than most people that had been members there had had in 27 years. So I felt this weird sense of, man, I wish you would have had the time that I had with him. How am I going to lead? How can I step in this situation? It was a weird thing. So COVID moved, new house, new church, new city, new responsibility. Pastor dies, more responsibility than I ever thought. My doctorate. And things outside of my family felt like they were going crazy, more than I could bear. But I had my family. And so I would come home at night, play with my kids, be with my wife, thought everything was good. Then we find out something. And I'm about to tell you what it is that we found out. And you may laugh. You may think that's not a big deal. You may think, how could you have reacted that way? But I want to go ahead and give you permission to react however you want to react. But I'm just telling you, we found out we were pregnant, okay? After we had just gotten rid of 100% of all the baby stuff. After we had just bought a house for that size family. And when we found out, it was devastating. Now, some of you in this room, some of you watching online may hear that and you've struggled with infertility and you're saying, how dare him? I get it. I know how it sounds. But sometimes your thoughts aren't ones you choose, but it's what you do with them that matters. I was devastated. I had never had anything happen in my family's life that I didn't feel like I was in control of. I had never had anything happen in my life where I didn't feel like I had a plan for it. This was completely out of left field. This is not what I planned. We had all of our kids 18 months apart, and now we've got this 5-month gap. I know how it sounds. I know. The immaturity's not lost on me, okay? See, it wasn't about the baby who was born, and his name's David. And I told him when he was born, you better be my favorite because you put me through a lot. But it wasn't about the baby. It was about me wanting what? Control. Was I rejoicing in the one who was in control and in charge? No. Was I presenting my requests to God? No. And in that moment, for over 20 weeks, I was in the darkest season of my life. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to hang out with anybody. I would wake up, go to work, come home, come to the bed. I felt this heaviness, like I was in this darkness, and Rachel would pray for me. She would buy books for me. She would encourage me with Bible verses, and listen, I'm a pastor. I knew intellectually what I was supposed to do, but I wanted nothing to do with it. I was bitter. I was angry. I was hurt. My pride was broken. Man, let's just say it, I had judged people. Like, man, can't you plan your pregnancies? Listen, if you thought good of me, you're not anymore. I get it. This is just what I was going through. How am I going to be able to provide for my family now? It was irrational anxiety that was gripping my life. I was anxious about the future that I thought I had planned out, and I thought everything was going well. And I was depressed about my present because this is not the life that I thought we were going to have. And notice, it had nothing to do with David. It had everything to do with what was going on in my heart and my head. It was a really dark season. Really dark season. And I'll tell you what I didn't do in that season. I didn't faithfully do Philippians 4:6. I didn't. And I didn't tell anybody what I was going through. I didn't ask people, hey, would you pray for me because clearly I'm not handling this well. I tried to muscle it up and get through it, and guess what? That didn't go very well. Men, you are the worst at that. For some reason, we have bought in, and I say we have bought into the lie that to be a man is to not share what you're struggling with and to just muscle up and push forward. That is a lie straight from hell. Because I'm telling you, I've tried it, and I was in the darkest season of my life. God didn't design you to try to get through things on your own, in your own strength, and put on a front like you're okay. He designed you, and He calls you that when your thoughts are more than you can bear, to ask Him. Beg Him. Pray to Him. Thank Him for who He is. To cast all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. And if you do that, why not tell somebody else so they can be praying for you too? I didn't do that. I was trying to wait out my circumstance. You ever done that? God doesn't ask you to wait out your circumstance, and He doesn't promise to change your circumstance. He promises something better. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Where's the promise that you need? Verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, transcends all understanding. The peace of God, which doesn't make sense, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Notice, Paul doesn't say, if you do this, your situation will change. He doesn't say that. Paul doesn't say, and everything that you struggle with mentally will all be gone. He doesn't say that. He says, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. The peace of God. If anxiety is a divided mind and feeling pulled apart, that's what the Greek is getting at. Peace is wholeness. Peace is something that we all need, and it will transcend all understanding. Why? Because when you're going through something unexpected, when you're facing that diagnosis, when you have just lost your job, when you were in a bad accident, it doesn't make sense for you to have peace. But you know what you need? You know what I needed? You know what matters more than your situation changing? It's having peace in the midst of it. Because guess what? Your situation may not change. But what would you rather? Your situation without Jesus or your situation with Jesus? With Jesus, you get His peace. Without Jesus, you can try it on your own. Don't try it on your own anymore. No matter what you're facing, no matter what you're going through, present your request to God and give it to Him. And let that peace transcend your mind and guard your mind, he tells us, from future thoughts that are more than you can bear. I don't know what you're dealing with this morning. I don't know what you came in here with. I don't know what maybe you've been through. But right now, in this moment, I believe that God invites all of us, wherever we are, just to admit to Him that my thoughts are more than I can bear. And God, I need your help. That's the first step along the path of giving it to Him and receiving His peace. And so here's what I want to do. If everybody would just bow their heads and close their eyes for a moment.